welcome to the Land Pioneers podcast, where we get to meet some of the most prominent land developers in Australia. And today we've got Jeff Bretag from McCloy Group. Jeff, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Stan.
Sure thing. So look, I'm really keen to get you to basically explore some of your experiences and talk about how you've come into this industry. And so look, just a little bit about Jeff for the listeners here. He's an urban planner by background, and he's got tertiary qualifications in environmental science, urban planning and bushfire planning, and has over 15 years of experience working as an urban planner within state government, local government, and private enterprises. So these qualifications and experiences have led him to obtaining accreditations as a registered planner with the Planning Institute of Australia, PIA, and also as an accredited bushfire consultant with the Fire Protection Association, FPA. Currently, his role is the planning director at the McCloy Group, where he's responsible for procuring approvals for residential communities and employment precincts. He's been involved in master plan community projects such as Regrowth, Curry Curry, and Monarchs Rise, Kings Hill. He's also currently the Hunter Committee Chair of the Urban Development Institute of Australia, UDIA. And this committee is made up of 25 experienced professionals who are championing integrated transport planning outcomes, such as the Hunter region that it strives to annually deliver over 7,000 homes under the Housing Accord targets. Key projects of the committee include developing a land supply monitor for each of the 5 lower Hunter councils and championing the industry's response to the review of the Biodiversity Conservation Act. Jeff is apparently honoured and enthused to be appearing on the Land Pioneers podcast. I'm super excited to hear a little bit more as we go through the questions. But just quickly, a little bit about Eagle Vision. So we're the sponsors for the Land Pioneers podcast, and at Eagle Vision, we're your trusted partners in property development, driven by a commitment to transparency, a straightforward process, and a deep passion for helping our clients create sustainable legacies that will endure for generations to come. So some of the 3 things that make Eagle Vision unique and where we may be a good fit: less is more, 24/7, and no surprises. Less is more, strategy and our extensive experience. So having the background in property development, the strategy of effective 3D visuals is the most important component and definitely takes priority over everything else. And after nearly 700 projects completed in over 15 years of operation, we're pretty confident in what we create. 24/7 operation. So our team being based in Australia and Europe, we work on a 24-hour turnaround basis to increase pace for our clients and their projects. And ultimately, no surprises. We pride ourselves on transparency in operation and have built systems and processes to involve our clients at every step. They get to see the inner workings of the machine and can track the progress of their projects intimately. We're also constantly thinking of new ideas and experimenting on these internally in order to ensure the best return on their investment, such as interactive master plans for large-scale land communities, such as what we've created for some of the McCloy Group projects. And some of these features include being able to track and analyze buyer behavior for informed decision-making, such as which lots are attracting the most interest, amongst others. Experience the future today. Visit us at www.eaglevision.com.au to discover a world of possibilities. And now back to our guest, Jeffrey Bretag from the McCloy Group. So, Jeff, you've been across a whole range of planning experiences. What actually inspired you to pursue a career in environmental science and urban planning?
Yeah, good question, Stan. It probably sounds a bit corny, but I think a lot of reason people get into planners is that they want to make a difference.
Yep.
And I thought, and I still think that you can do that as an urban planner. So I originally started doing environmental science through the University of Newcastle, and through that experience, did some work experience at a local council, and realised that it was the project managers who were the planners in coordination with those elected officials, being the councillors, who had the ability to make decisions and foster and make that largest difference when it came to our local communities. And so I was really encouraged by that experience, and and went on to do a Masters of Planning at the University of Sydney, and got some work experience in Sydney, and yeah, so I think through those experiences, I realised that planning does have the potential to, influence the environment around us in coordination with those other stakeholders, whether, it be yourself as, someone who produces those 3D visuals, which is an absolutely, important communication tool for our company now, but as planners working in, local government to actually be able to communicate what is proposed and hopefully assist with showing that the impacts are positive and that the design has been, changed and updated to reflect any concerns that there might have been. So I don't know. I don't know how I ended up where I was, where I am now, but I think it definitely started from, that aspiration of trying to make a difference. And I think, you get offered opportunities along the way and you follow this path. And I'm lucky enough now to be working for the McCloy Group, who are, probably one of the largest property developers in the Hunter. And our projects go across the New South Wales. And through being involved in those projects, I do have the opportunity to make a difference through, the appropriate planning of and layout of those master plan communities. So, yeah, it's
Very cool.
it's still exciting to be a planner, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you've also mentioned, biodiversity and bushfire. They're really interesting sort of qualifications, quite different from typical planning, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think they've kind of come about, and I'm sure you may have found this in your career as well, Stan, that, as you get these problems thrown at you in development projects, you're like, well, I don't know anything about that. Do I go and speak to someone and find out the answers, or do you realize that it keeps popping up? And if you knew a bit more about that, would that help you be more effective in your job from a day-to-day basis? So I've seen, being in the profession only 15 years, biodiversity has grown in terms of its consideration of our master plan communities in particularly. And to the point now where if we are looking at a site or planning for a site, it's the first consideration that we give, how much biodiversity we need to avoid. And then that, you take that out and you end up, that then becomes your development footprint and you start considering those other matters. And I think hand in glove with that is the bushfire consideration. Being a regional developer, and New South Wales having some of the most comprehensive or prescriptive bushfire planning regulations in the world means that almost every site is mapped as bushfire prone. And so having an understanding of how to plan for that, the appropriate setbacks and provisions of water and access and things like that. I think they're just two fundamental things that we consider in the design of our communities. And so having that greater expertise and qualifications only helps in understanding a site and moving forward with it.
Yeah, definitely. And especially like bushfires, they almost happen every year. So it's a regular occurrence. You might as well plan for these. And similarly with biodiversity, if you're able to sort of foresee how your community integrates with the environment around, it would definitely set you up in a better way, especially with the scale of projects that the McCloy Group works on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and biodiversity is so hot and controversial in New South Wales at the moment. It's we've been on this pathway of this market-based mechanism to assess the biodiversity on site. And then once you do that, you generate a credit value for the different plant community types on your site. And it works in New South Wales, or it's meant to work similar to the stock exchange, in terms of there's a market out there and each credit has a certain value when you buy and sell these credits to offset your impacts of the development. So it's quite complicated, and it's something of a discipline that's grown so much in New South Wales, and we talk about it a fair bit here. While we all want good biodiversity outcomes, and there's a lot of uncertainty around the legislation at the moment. And there was an independent review done last year by Dr. Ken Henry, who's pretty well recognised, and he identified that the current biodiversity legislation isn't working. It isn't achieving good environmental outcomes because it's not clear how much biodiversity needs to be avoided, and each council's interpreting it so differently. So, and the flow-on effects for that is it's a contributor, as we see it, to housing affordability because it's impacting on supply. One of our biggest sites, because of the uncertainty of how much vegetation we actually have to avoid, there's, you make a call and, you go to the council and they assess it and they either agree or disagree with you. And in this particular instance, we've had to avoid 30% of residential zone land. So the implication for that is that the yield is reduced by 300 lots. And for a development site of only 1,000 lots, if you replicated that across all New South Wales, you're looking at quite a significant shortfall in the amount of yield that's being lost, which is homes for people, and has a flow-on effect of that affordability. So it's interesting times in New South Wales, and the government's looking to respond to that independent inquiry very shortly. So we're watching it very closely, and because as everyone knows across the country and across the world, housing affordability is just becoming worse and worse, and we're at the front line of that. So it's you see how these little policy decisions in relation to things like biodiversity are playing out on the ground.
Yeah, interesting. We've never really explored this topic in the past. So, and from what I sort of understood was you've got some wetlands, there's some river creek beds, and maybe, a playground with some trees around it. That's kind of was my understanding of where you put biodiversity, but you're talking about something far more complicated by the sounds of things.
Yeah, it's very complicated, and obviously we use ecologists and who have professionals to help us navigate the system. But like our biggest site at Regrowth Curry, which you've done the visuals for, which look fantastic. That site has a total area of about 2,000 hectares, and our stewardship site. So it's a stewardship site in New South Wales is essentially the land you lock away for biodiversity outcomes, and you have to manage that in perpetuity. And through that management, you generate credits that you can then sell to other developers or retire for our own development site. And so that stewardship site's the largest in the Hunter. And it's so the legislation, it's enabling some good conservation outcomes in terms of locking up this land and a high conservation value. But at the same time, it's a bit ambiguous, so it's creating a lot of uncertainty for developers, as I just explained.
Like especially if 30% of the land that you would have used for housing, you're now locking away and really can't do anything with. Of course, they'll have massive impacts. So thanks for that. That's really interesting. So how about being the chair of the UDIA for the Hunter region? What have been some of the, I suppose, challenges having been there like that, and what have you done to overcome them? Really, really proud to have taken over that role. I've been on the committee for about 2.5 years, and then late last year, the former chair stepped down, and I was lucky enough to take up that role. And I think the hardest thing, Stan, is trying to know where to aim and have the most impact. I'm sure we all see that in our day-to-day lives or our professions. It's you can do so many things, but what skills do you have, and what skills are on your team to be able to target a few key areas and actually achieve some real change. So that's what we have tried to do. I think we could be doing so many things, but the focus of the committee, we decided, is that we want to
focus on biodiversity and making it really clear about how much vegetation needs to be avoided. So developers have some clear goalposts when they look at a site, how much land they know that they'll be able to develop. Number two is, there's so much talk in the media about housing supply and that contributing to housing affordability. We want to really work with a lot of the five lower hunter councils and go, we've got all this industry information about land supply. Can we work with you and share information to actually develop a public register of what land supply is out there? Because I'm not sure it's a bit more mature in some of the metropolitan areas, but in the hunter we just don't have any publicised data that goes to the land boundaries about how much supply there is. So if you don't know how much supply there is, how can you actually be informed about releasing further land and how that's impacting on affordability? So that's our second key focus, and then we have some other focuses in terms of then following up once we understand the supply, what infrastructure is needed, and be able to map and clearly articulate how much money essentially we need to provide infrastructure to unlock land for housing. And then the fourth one is where, yes, we are a regional area, but we're seeing more and more due to the cost of housing and the direction of government that the desire and market preference for smaller lots and some different type building typologies than just detached housing is coming into the hunter. So so we've got 4 subcommittees focusing on these key things, and it's really exciting. It's exciting to have a forum to debate these things and talk about it because we're all constantly learning, aren't we? And it's I'm really enjoying it so far.
That's cool. Just diving a little bit deeper, because the hunter region is quite vast. So what's kind of happening? Are there certain cities or activity centres that are starting to become their own little townships? And so people are more drawn to those because there's just so much land you could rezone. So how do you kind of strategically focus on this is the bit that we're going to expand and so forth?
Yeah, it's a good question, Stan. The lower hunter is made up of 5 councils, and Maitland Council last year was announced as the fastest growing council in regional New South Wales, and then next to that is Cessnock, and I think they're of a similar status. So we're just seeing so much demand coming out of Sydney because Sydney's the affordability of Sydney continues to worsen. So you can essentially live in the lower hunter in Newcastle, and you can still commute to Sydney, or work from home arrangements. You only have to go to Sydney 1 or 2 days a week. So the demand is as strong as it's ever been, and so there's obviously a need for infill housing close to the existing infrastructure and services, and we're seeing a lot of apartment towers going up in Newcastle, and the skyline has a few cranes, which is fantastic. But overall, people are still moving to Newcastle because they have a preference to have a backyard. So we have a really good research institute at the University of Newcastle, and they've done some recent research in coordination with one of our members on the committee, Third Eye, and so it surveyed a number of people from the Greater Sydney region and said, what are your preferences for housing, and what do you desire? Is it a short commute to work, or is it a backyard, and then all these things, and it came out, and there's other surveys from a number of the other councils as well that came out that there is a mismatch between too much detached housing, and so I think there's about a 10% mismatch, but overall there's still a strong preference, if given the choice, that over 70% of people would still want to live in a detached house with a backyard. So that puts obviously pressure on still providing greenfield, broadacre development, because that's what people still want, and that's the business that the McCloy Group is in. So that's something that we're constantly trying to communicate to ourselves and the consent authorities, that we understand the planning benefits of infill development. It makes sense, but the market preference is that there's still an over demand for this detached housing. So, and that's what we see. I mentioned Cessnock and Maitland earlier, is that they're on the periphery of Newcastle, and they've got these areas of land that can provide housing with the backyard. So that's what we're seeing. That's where the demand is, and I think that's where it will be for some time to come.
Yeah, look, especially with infrastructure like the Maitland Hospital being in there and all that stuff, I imagine amenity-wise being so close in Maitland, why would somebody work or try to live in Newcastle, where probably, I imagine, housing is going up in terms of that's pricing and thus affordability dropping in Newcastle, so they're much better off going for a detached house nearby Maitland. Seems like a logical conclusion, right?
Yeah. That's that investment in infrastructure out amongst those greenfield areas. So, that's a key piece of infrastructure, and there's some major road projects going on at the moment. There's a lot of investment, and in particularly road projects, and the hospital was a big one as well. So, if those services are near those broadacre developments, then you can live out there and still be appropriately serviced and have that amenity. So, yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Look, switching gears a little bit away from planning. So in our sort of chat, you mentioned that you're about to undertake a 100-kilometer endurance race. That really stood out for me, because an amateur doesn't really go off and, run 100 kilometers in one go on the weekend. How did you get into it? And I guess, how do you apply that to business, if at all?
Yeah. I think I've always been a bit of a jogger. Like, I would always go for a jog, if you will, to, clear my head and possibly relieve some stress and get that runner's high as you hear about. And I think the start of last year, I entered a 10K up at Port Macquarie, where you're about to do your try, as I understand, Stan. I said I did a 10K, and I got to the end of it, and I was like, you know what, I can do it. I can do better. So I got the bug, and did a series of 22 events, and then ended up doing a 50-kilometer race up at Mount Kosciuszko in December, and I got through it. I wouldn't say I excelled by any sense of the imagination, but I got through it. And I think through that, your mind goes to places where you're like, am I actually capable of this? Am I fit enough? Am I good enough? And what I took from that 50 kilometers at Kosciuszko is that I think you can do anything if you set your mind to it and you develop those daily routines. And I think I really like this quote that, show me your daily routine and I'll tell you your life, So I think, like, by having a schedule and training each day, and even turning up to work with, a particular set of priorities and that you want to tick off, you obviously slowly build something up to the point where something that was hard, and what I saw in December with that run, it was really hard. And then I did a similar run in training for this 100 the last weekend, and I cut 2.5 hours off my time from what I did in December. So that was a really good confidence boost, and I think I got there through those, that having that daily routine and working towards something. So I think, I'm excited for the 100. It's in about 5 weeks' time, and I think I would always like to go faster, but you just need to be realistic about where you are at this point in time and do the best you can. So, I definitely think you can apply that to your business or your profession. it's just having that daily routine. And I think, there's always setbacks, but the setbacks are only temporary, and the bad times are only bad because they're relative to the good times, right? So I think if you just realize that those bad times will shortly pass, and not too long, you'll have an approval, and you'll be in the delivery phase, and onwards and upwards.
Yeah, that's very wise. But still, going from 50 up to 100, that doubles what you're actually about to attempt. So, I can't imagine. Look, for starters, it's not a sprint. It takes a little while to get into, and I'm sure you'll pace yourself and everything like that. But it's just undertaking a distance of that nature. It's quite insane for an average person, not even, someone that runs a little bit on the weekends.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm definitely a weekend warrior. I would definitely call myself a weekend warrior. It's like, but I think it's helped me improve my health. I think, being someone who works in an office, you sit at a desk all day, and slowly, your posture gets worse and worse. But by having something physical to aim for and build up strength to go towards, and going for a run at lunch to clear your mind, I've seen my health improve significantly, and it clears your mind, and you forget about your worries when you're running, and you come back with some brilliant ideas usually when that you apply to work. So it'll be a big undertaking, but I'm looking forward to the challenge, and I think my wife's looking forward to me not running every other spare minute. So I'm pretty sure she's keen for it to be over as well.
Yes, I've experienced that a lot as well with mine. How long would you expect this 100 to take?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I did the 50K practice run on the weekend in 7 hours. So if you times that by 2, that takes you to 14, and then account for some
recovery stops.
Yeah. So I would love to say I would get it done in under 16 hours. But I won't. Yeah, let's see what happens.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. So what time do you normally start, like for that race? Is it like a 3 o'clock in the morning start or something?
Yeah, well, it starts. They have like 5 waves. So it's such a popular event. There's thousands of people that go up to the Blue Mountains to do it, and it's such a beautiful setting as well. But so I think it starts around 7 o'clock. So ideally 7 a.m. So ideally, if if it was 14 or 16 hours, I'd be finished before 12 p.m. that night. So I think beyond that, I've watched a lot of YouTube runners, runners on YouTube, and I think beyond that, there's potential to hallucinate, and as you get sleep deprived, and all those things.
All kinds of things come up, I'm sure. But look, you've done the 50, you've done the training. Good luck with the rest of it. Hopefully, it works out well for you. And who knows, you might end up undertaking an ultra even beyond the 100 down the track.
I'll you know what it's like, Stan. You finish one thing and then you move on to the next. But I'll
start thinking how else to challenge yourself. Yeah.
Oh, exactly. Because I think once you apply yourself for a long period and you get those little wins, even if it's just crossing a finish line, there's no greater feeling than that type of high, So, I think we're always pushing for the next challenge. So,
it's pretty awesome.
How's your training going, Stan?
Yeah, no, 3 weeks to go or thereabouts. These are the last couple of weeks of building up to the race. So everything is sore and painful, but I know that there's a time frame to when that'll be over, and hopefully I'll complete and better my time from the last Ironman that I've done. So we'll see how it goes.
What are you aiming for?
Hopefully 5 hours and 15 for the 70.3.
Yeah, wow.
and did Bustleton in 5030. So Port Macquarie is a much more intense up and down race from what I've been told. So it'll be a great challenge to see how I go with all that.
Yeah, I wish you all the best as well. I'm excited to hear. We can compare notes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, look, I'm also keen to hear a little bit more about your involvement with the McCloy Group. Obviously, being the planner or the planning director there, you're responsible for quite a lot on how McCloy sort of approaches projects. And one of the things that I've noticed over the years are the public art installations that every project seems to have. So, what is the sort of thinking behind it, and how does that enhance perhaps the lifestyle, or what is it like for the community members to have that?
Yeah, good question. Jeff McCloy, our chairman, and obviously the name of the McCloy Group. He's got an absolute passion for public art, and um, it is a prominent part of all our developments. And I think you can tell it's a McCloy development because before you even drive into the entrance, there's some enormous piece of public art that is quite distinctive. I think it creates a sense of place. You talk about sense of place, or planners or urban designers talk about a sense of place, and each development has its own theme. Each master plan community has its own theme, and the art speaks to that theme. So one of our popular developments at Taralba around Lake Macquarie, it's right on the lake, beautiful setting, water views of the lake, and as you drive in the main entrance, you've got pelicans and seabirds that speak to that setting, and they act as landmarks. As planners, we talk about wayfinding and landmarks, and it's something that you could get a photo of yourself, or a selfie in front of one of those pieces of public art, and you'd go, yeah, that's Billy's Lookout at Taralba. And it's something that definitely separates our communities from other subdivisions, in that it has that prominence of that public art, and it's recognised, and yeah, it's a great feature, and it's all Jeff's doing. He sources the art or sources the artists and commissions the artists, and it's something that we don't have to do. We're not required to do. So it really separates the communities from some of our competitors. That's for sure.
Look, to make something stand out, it's such a noisy world in general when it comes to marketing projects. I'm sure those kind of pieces really connect the community, because from what I've understood, a lot of the time they're local artists or local sculptors that are creating these. So it's another sort of bridge to how this community is going to be connected to the nearby sort of people that are already living there.
Absolutely, Stan. And I think the project you've most recently been involved with us at Regrowth, the entrance sits on the top of a hill off a main road where we'll be doing a signalised intersection, and we've allocated two large portions of residential land either side of that boulevard. And we've commissioned a 8 metre high Corten steel statue of these rings, and on the other side there's a fig tree that we've already planted. So over time it'll be this gateway, and you'll be able to see it from so many different directions because of the topography, and you go, yeah, that's the Loxford, that's Loxford Waters, and I know how to orientate myself to that as a pedestrian or a vehicle, and it's their statement pieces. That's for sure.
That's very cool. And so, what are those three rings? What do they signify?
Yeah, it's a good question. They're really just a building of some of the different textures and materials that'll be used there as well. So Jeff McCloy is really he has good taste, I would say, and he loves using timbers and Gabion wars and Corten steel, and those rings are an extension of that theme. I would say would be the best way to.
Okay. So there's no kind of three things coming together and then joining in, and that's why the Loxford is what it is?
Not that I'm aware of, but I'm sure we can come up with something, Steve, and that because it would be a good story. But yeah, I think it's at the moment they're just they're going to be an impressive piece of material.
Art installation, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's very cool. And then also from what I've noticed of witnessing the McCloy Group's activities, you're quite involved with a lot of philanthropic activity or ambitions or aspirations. So the Mark Hughes Foundation being one of them. Can you talk a little bit about that and what I suppose comes out from that?
Yeah. Once again, it's all Jeff McCloy's generosity. He doesn't talk about it. But when you look at the rap sheet, if you will, over the past few years, like I think last year he gave $1 million to the Sione Foundation, who is a retired football player, and he's from an island nation in the Pacific, and he was talking to Jeff, and he said, there's this island where I come from, and they haven't had clean drinking water in 20 years. And Jeff said, wow. Okay, well, what do you need for them to have clean drinking water? And he wrote them a check for $1 million. And now, this project went underway for 12 months, and they now have clean drinking water for the first time in 20 years. And the Mark Hughes Foundation is of a similar line to that. Mark Hughes is a Newcastle boy, and we love our rugby league in Newcastle, and he's part of the '97 Knights team that won the first premiership in Newcastle. And obviously that makes him a god in Newcastle as it is, but unfortunately, Mark developed brain cancer, and he went on this pathway of developing his own foundation. And I think Jeff just heard his story one day and said, "That's a great cause. Can I give you $1 million?" and gave him a check for $1 million. And the relationship has just matured from there. That now Mark is an ambassador for the McCloy Group. And it ties in really well with our regrowth curry project, because Mark is a curry boy, grew up in curry. Wow. Yeah, so it ties really well with him having that connection to the community for our biggest project. So it works really well there. And then just another part of it is just Jeff giving back to the community, because obviously he's been around a while and been involved in some pretty big construction projects in the Hunter in earlier years, and now he's focused on these master planning communities. So he recognises that we wouldn't be anything without these communities. We're creating places for people, and if those people that we're creating places for, if we, are involved with someone who is actually from that community, then they're better informed, and they just end up being better communities at the end of the day. So yeah, we're very lucky and proud to have Mark Hughes as our ambassador.
That's very cool. All right, and so now let's talk a bit about some of the projects that you're working on. So we touched a little bit on biodiversity, and obviously it's part of the bigger theme of sustainability. Can you talk a little bit about some of the features of your projects when it comes to looking after how these will be, I suppose, footprints for sustainable future?
Yeah. I think as I mentioned, with our regrowth project, it's going to be the largest stewardship site in the Hunter. So it's of several hundred hectares of lands that will be locked up in perpetuity to achieve that conservation outcome. So that's something that we're really proud of. There's obviously many other considerations, but when we're first looking at a site, there's legislation in New South Wales that says you need to protect and enhance natural waterways. So you'll see through a number of our projects that the waterways that are retained, vegetation management plans go over those waterways, and while we're in the construction phase, they're managed for weeds and revegetated in terms of native vegetation types, and they become a better place than if we had never been there with the development in the first place. So I think that's a fantastic outcome.
Yeah. What about solar or anything like that?
Yeah, we're a land developer in the sense that we don't get involved in the building side too much. We are looking at community batteries in some of our larger developers. So if purchasers want to, once they build their housing and they want to put solar panels on their roof, which in New South Wales, it's just a no-brainer now in terms of achieving your energy efficiency ratings under the legislation, then any excess solar has the potential to feed back into these community batteries, which is something that we haven't seen too much. Well, I can't think of an example in the Hunter where it's been done. So I think that's going to be something fantastic that we can use. And another part of that is also, the rise of EVs. And so we're putting in, a number of local parks, and as part of that, looking to, install those EV chargers to cater for that demand when it comes. So, there's little things all over the place that I think you don't even realise, but it's moving in that direction. So, which is a good thing. So we need to make sure that we're catering for that and responding to it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think we've covered quite a broad range of topics of all across different things. I really want to thank you for your time of being with us on the Land Pioneers podcast. Just a little bit about that bit for the listeners. Thanks for tuning in to the podcast, and we hope to interview some of the most prominent land developers in this industry today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you with us here, and we'd obviously love to hear your thoughts. And remember to rate and share the podcast if you found it of interest, and ultimately click subscribe when you're there so you don't miss an episode. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day.